Hey guys, Cameron from Mr. Robot, Season 2, Episode 3, K3rnel Panic, and I was so looking forward to this episode, especially after the premiere last week. I absolutely loved everything about last week's premiere. I thought it very well introduced the storyline. I really loved where everything was going, and I also loved how, I think, I didn't say this, but I like how last week they definitely are trying to make this less of just Elliot's show, because to an extent it is, but they're trying to make it more of an ensemble show, and you definitely do see that in this episode. This episode was long. It definitely was long. It was movie length. It was an hour and 2 minutes long, which is pretty crazy, but, I like that Mr. Robot is doing that because they need to tell the story as fleshed out as possible, and they need to, tell the story that they want to tell, and Sam Ismail, he's in control of everything, and if he wants to make the episode long, he very well can do that, and I like that USA isn't giving him any restrictions. It's like FX. They can make the episode as long as they want, and while this episode was long, for me, I thought it was the best of the three. I absolutely love this episode. There was so much great stuff put in here. This episode felt like a movie. It really did. I mean, last week's did as well, but this one felt a lot like a movie. Just the way it was done, every episode of Mr. Robot feels so cinematic. They really do. But this episode in particular just really felt like a movie. Let's just get into it because there's so much to cover in this episode. So much went down, and it really was a crazy episode. There's so much that was going on that I didn't even notice that there was no Joanna in this episode, because there wasn't any Joanna. Besides that, this episode pretty much touched upon everything, but let's just get into it. We start off in the past. Now, we don't know exactly where this is, but it's clearly in the past. We see Romero and Mobley are at Coney Island on Christmas, and we touch a lot more upon these two in this episode. They're actually one of the central focuses of this episode. We see how much closer these two were, which this is something I like, because last season they kind of were just another part of the hacker group, and this season they're really trying to make them more full-fledged characters. And Mobley, and you can tell right away that it is a flashback when Mobley asks why they're going to an arcade, which he questions. Romero says this is the problem with this generation, too ADD to really take in the world and to really get in, and he tells him this very long, elaborate story that basically all have to do with different instances of someone opening up, this shop or the arcade or whatever, and then dying. You first see this married couple, they opened up a freak show, and, everything was going good for them at Coney Island, and one day the husband killed his entire family, including himself, so that was one of them. Then 1960, there was this woman named Mary Megan Fisher who made to an old school arcade, and one day she just got, she also made a bar so she could get drunk with her friends, but she got so drunk that a pool cue went right through her head, so she died. And Mobley, of course, doesn't really understand why he's telling her any of this, because it doesn't really make any sense, obviously. So, because, what does this have to do with anything? Romero knocks the door, they go inside, says this place remains vacant until 2000, when Ned Buchan put it under Fun Society of Amusement, LCC, and we actually know what F Society stands for. It's supposed to stand for Fun Society of Amusement, and he wanted to reopen it as a classic arcade. Then about a year ago, his older son Harold wanted to sell it, but Ned wasn't down with that, so Harold, being simple-minded, decided Ned had to go. So Harold stole his twin brother's rifle, shot Ned in the face, and what Harold wasn't counting on, considering he had never fired a weapon before, was the kickback, which kicked him back so hard he fell out of the 20-story window. And he says this all went down when his brother Clyde was in his bedroom telling it to Romero, trying to catch some Z's when it all went down, and by the time he got his bearings, he was arrested for the death since the weapon was in his name. So yeah, really long, elaborate story, but then we really start to understand what this all means when Mobley, is asking how he knows Clyde, and Romero says that he was his cellmate. This place, made him crazy. He thinks it's cursed, and Mobley agrees, and Romero says that before he left the clank, he gave him the keys to the joint and made him swear that he'd burn it down before it causes anyone anything, down, because obviously everyone that seems to be, part of this and owns it, they end up dying. So Romero, he's not paranoid, he says straight out that he's not paranoid. He's seen a lot of shit in his life, there's no way that he'd be paranoid, but he's also not, confident enough that he'll be able to keep this place open and that he'll be able to, work there, because he says, that his money's tight, and Mobley says he's not there for him, he wants him to work with them. Romero says he just got out, he can't go back anytime soon, and Mobley says to just hear him out, they need a freaker, and he's the best in the game, and Romero says not to sweet talk him, he doesn't need to tell him who's the best, he invented this shit, and he says either he's ready or he's finding someone else, but he can't get himself mixed up into whatever it is he's doing. And Mobley says this is a chance chance to get back in the system that stole 6 years of his life. He says it's a game changer. Romero asks who the guy is again, and Mobley says that he's a little weird, but he's gonna love this place, and he's got a thing for Coney Island. He'll like him. Actually, he'll hate him, but he's a genius. Best coder he ever met. And I think it's just the perfect way to describe Elliot. We can tell so well he's talking about Elliot, and he wants to meet him. Romero asks how much. He says he didn't even say yes yet. Money's going to be the deciding factor into all of this, and like Romero was saying, obviously, he's not going to do it unless the pay is good. I mean, that's kind of how any job works. I think if you really aren't sure about a job, you got to just make sure if the pay is good. I think then you kind of know if the job is good for you or not. But, anyway, that doesn't really have to do with this. But he basically says it's going to take a whole lot to bring him back. Mobley says, in a way, this pays everything. And Romero closes up the shop. Mobley asks what happened to the U and the N. And Romero says that that's a story for another time. And I just thought that was a great way to start things out. Absolutely love that. There's definitely more behind that you in the end. What does that have to do with everything? Why is he not telling him? I don't know. But such a great way to start. Absolutely love it. I think it just perfectly set things up. And then we go right back to the present, where also a great song in the beginning. I really like the song we had in the beginning. But Elliot tells us panic. Here it comes. Again, to remember this is the sudden cessation of fear. Overwhelming fear wrapping around his brain, screaming in his mind. And we then see him on the phone with Tyrell, right where last week's episode left off. And that's something I love that Mr. Robot does. It always has kind of like a prologue where it's like, this is where we expect to go, but it's not. And he says it's good to hear his voice. Elliot asks where he is. Tyrell says not yet, where he's supposed to be, but soon, very soon. Elliot asks where that is, and Tyrell says that he doesn't think that's a good idea. Elliot asks if he thinks someone is listening. Tyrell says to not tell him he's having second thoughts. He doesn't want him to have to worry about him, and Elliot says he needs to know what's going on. Tyrell says it's not safe. He wishes it were. He thinks about him a lot. He thinks about that night when they became gods, and Elliot says he wants to know what happened that night and says to tell him what happened, and basically, before anything can happen, we see Mr. Robot hangs up the phone. Here's the thing. We don't even know if this phone call is actually real. Is this actually happening? I mean, we know that Elliot is kind of crazier this season. He's hallucinating a lot more. There are a lot of things that he's seeing that aren't real, such as the gunshot last week. We clearly know that he got shot somehow, or that something happened there, because there was definitely blood dripping from his head. But obviously, he didn't shoot himself. We know that for a fact, or else he'd be dead. So that's very interesting, the way that was done. I thought that was a very good way to start things off. And then we further illustrate, what's going on with Mr. Robot. We really do get into that in this episode, and how he just wants Mr. Robot gone at all costs, because he comes out, hangs up the phone, agrees it's not safe on the phone, and Elliot says he's not going to let him make him prisoner of his own paranoia again. Mr. Robot says that he's not paranoid. He needs him more than he thinks he does. He says that they had a deal. He wanted to talk to him. He delivered. Elliot asks if he really expects him to believe it. Did they really talk to the most wild man on the planet? Mr. Robot asks why the fuck he's asking us, because, again, this is a situation where we can't help him because we don't know anything, and that's just the genius of the show. I love that. I love when the show does that. I love when Elliot wants us to help him out, but we don't know anything that's going on. We're as clueless as he is, and Mr. Robot's right. We can't help him here. And basically, he says that he heard it. He talked to him. Elliot says that he talked to him too. Mr. Robot asks what he wants. They had a deal. He delivered. What more does he want? Elliot says that what he always wanted for the panic to finally stop. But before it can, he then hears about Gideon's death on TV, and basically, this is basically a set for the rest of the episode. Is Elliot really trying to grapple with the fact that Gideon is dead? Remember, he had an instance where he wanted to shoot him. He wanted to kill Gideon. That dark part in his head, that Mr. Robot part, all the dark parts in his head, wanted to kill Gideon, but he didn't kill him, and now I'm thinking he kind of feels like, this was kind of his fault that this all happened, and again, he knows it's all connected to the 5-9 hack, which I think he kind of wishes he wasn't a part of, which, by the way, they revealed on Hacking Robot that the reason the hack was called 5-9 is that was actually the date that Edward Alderson's birthday, his father's birthday, which I think was just really clever the way that was done. Again, attention to detail, very important in the show, absolutely love it, and we then meet Romero's mom, Nell, and I love this woman. I mean, we need a character like this. We really did. We need some sort of really ridiculous comic relief, and she's on the phone coming her credit card, angrily asking why they can't send her a new one when they're not even in it with Evil Corp. She says she never thought of them like that. She asks how she's supposed to pay the bills if her pay stops working. She ends up the phone, and Mobley comes in looking for Romero. Now, she doesn't know who he, where he is or whatever, and Mobley just goes to find him, and he smells something really bad, and there's Romero shot dead on the pavement, so Mobley's never going to get that answer from him. And you know what? That made sense to me, because in the beginning, I'm like, why are we really seeing this, flashback? What was really the point of it? But now it makes sense. The fact that Romero wasn't scared and, didn't have that paranoia and didn't do what Clyde said to do, that's why he died. If he would have burnt it to the ground, then they might not have been in the situation. But the place clearly was haunted. The place clearly was vacant for a reason, and they should never have taken hold of it, and basically it seemingly killed him, which again, it's kind of ridiculous, but it just makes a lot of sense. I thought that was very well set up. Romero's now dead, and that also gives Dom a role now, because I was really wondering what Dom's going to do now that gives her a role. There were just so many great things about this scene. It gives Mobley more of a purpose. It further shows Mobley and Romero's relationship, and I really thought that was very well done. But then we get some really nice character development with Ray in the next scene. This is one of the reasons why I really loved the episode was as long as it was, because I think if the episode had not been as long, we would not have gotten all the great scenes we got of Ray in this episode. Because as I said, last week Craig Robinson kind of seemed like the normal guy. He definitely did. He seemed like, he was this normal guy that just really optimistic, and we realized in this episode that there was a lot more going on with him than we thought, and there are a lot more similarities to him and Elliot than we thought, because he's at his home, he's eating breakfast, talking to his wife, we think, and he says he was at Mel's flower shop, which has shut down, says with everything going on with the tracking, Mel says, Mel says fresh dollaries just aren't coming through. Besides, now the allowance is down to $50 per day, which is insane. I can't believe that can actually happen, but apparently, because of how bad the hack is, you can only give $50, you can only deposit $50 a day, which is crazy. It's like my weekly pay of like my allowance or something, but no one's paying it on Flower. He says the only way he's getting through this is having breakfast with her, and we see there's this great reveal where there's actually no one there. She's not there. She's clearly dead, and he's not actually talking to her. So that's just really interesting. We're kind of tripping up here. We're like, what's really going on? Is she really there? Is he talking to, what's he really talking to? Is it very much like Elliot, where he thought that Mr. Robot was there the whole time, when clearly it's just another part of his personality, and that's very much what's going on with Ray. Ray, however, is a man that kind of gets it. He's not completely insane like Elliot is, which I think is definitely very interesting, and we'll get into that later in the review, but Elliot's been watching basketball with Leon, who tells him to take it easy with the dosage, meaning that he's back, and we get this very subtle reveal that he's back to drugs, and he asks him what his problem is he's trying to solve. Elliot says he's fine. Leon says that's what he always says, and Mr. Robot says they're back to the morphine, asks him what he's going to accomplish, and Elliot tells him that it's not morphine, it's Adderall, and Elliot says it's his fault, all of it, last time he gets rid of him, takes a bunch of pills, try to get rid of him, but to no avail, and Elliot talks about when a computer gets hit with a kernel panic, which is of course what the episode's called, there's only so much you can do. An internal fatal error is hard to recover from, but ODing on Adderall was finding his way to control him, and a man then comes up to him, asks him if he has a minute, and asks if it's the FBI, and if Gideon rates him out. A van then comes up, hits him, two men put a bag over his head, they throw him into the van. This kind of comes out of nowhere, but again, Mr. Robot does a great job in just random things, not really knowing what they mean, but just really interesting, and that's a great example this year, where this is something where we don't know what the hell is going on, or even if this is actually happening, but it's just so fascinating to watch. We see on the subway, this man singing in German, Mobley's in on the subway, a cop sees him, when everyone gets off, he stays, and Darlene goes to him, admits that her and Elliot only wanted to use him as a liability, we find out, and he asks why she's such an asshole. She asks if anyone saw him, and he says just Nell, and he's clearly still grappling with Romero's death. That's what he's focusing on. I mean, his best friend just died, and he asked what she wanted him to do when she was upstairs. He wonders what they did, and basically Elliot's then brought in a station where the men tie him to, so I thought that was just a very interesting scene. Really like the way that was done. Again, just really good stuff with Mobley. Really love the characterization we got of him here. And then we get to the really fucked up stuff I know you guys want me to talk about, something I think that was very reminiscent of Elliot's drug trip last year. If you remember that episode, in episode 4 of last season, where basically the entire episode was Elliot tripping. It pretty much was, and this is kind of like that. In some ways it is, in some ways it isn't, but Elliot's brought to a station where the men tie him to a chair, they take the bag off his head, he asks where he is, the men pull out a wheelbarrow, and they make him eat what's in it from the funnel, they pour it down his throat, and they feed him him ass loads of it, and the man that had is there too, and we don't know who the man is, and he then throws it all up in his home. Mr. Robot says to get the Adderall out of his system, get those shitty pills out, as we wonder if this is actually happening, because this entire time, I can't even tell if this is actually happening, because the man that's revealed to be Mr. Robot after this, and then we see Elliot literally digging through the vomit just to get his pills. I mean, it's disgusting stuff, but just seeing the desperation, Elliot, seeing what he's going through, doing what he will do whatever he can to get rid of Mr. Robot, even if it is crawling through vomit and trying to get the pills. The pills is what's making Mr. Robot go away, and he's going to do whatever he can to make sure he does go away, and he says that he will not be owned. Just a really powerful scene, really did love that. Angela's then at Evil Corp, and I think we got a lot more characterization of Angela in this episode, because it seemed like last week that Angela was going into more of an anti-hero, and definitely she is, but I don't think she's all the way there yet. I think this episode definitely shows that she has a long way to go before she is quote-unquote a villain, because I don't think she definitely is. I mean, Portia Doubleday even said to not judge Angela based on that scene, so I'm not going to. I'm going to listen to what Portia Doubleday said, that she's a lot more complicated than that. I think this episode really does hint at that. We see she goes to Price, who gives his condolences about Gideon and says it's very unfortunate when bad things happen to good people, and then talks about the interview she set up, how it's all wrong. He wants to Fox instead of Bloomberg, no pre-interview, and he wants final approval of all questions beforehand, and she says that she's on it, and she leaves, but not before saying that she thinks this is a mistake, that Fox isn't where they should be right now. Bloomberg is where investors get their news. He tells her to sit down, and she does as asked. He sits down next to her, and she asks if she's ever had dinner at Fidelio's, and she says she hasn't, and he says it used to be a bar years ago, and now it's one of the finest restaurants in the city, and he knows the chef very good, and he says that he'll have his cell make a reservation. She agrees. He said that he'll arrange a car to pick her up Saturday at 8, and he agrees, and Bloomberg is more appropriate. They'll stick with that. She thanks him, and he says that he notices she always looks at his picture before she leaves, and he says that she must find it interesting, as he does, how a man can change the whole world with a bullet in its place. And it's just a really interesting scene. Really like the way that was done. I like seeing this transformation in Angela. Definitely like where that's going. But then we see Dom, I'm not gonna call her Dom, not DPR, they call her Dom. Dom is at home watching a dating show on TV. She's scrolling through her phone and what happened to Gideon, and asks Alexa, not Siri, it's like Alexa on your Samsung, what time is it? And she says 4:03 a.m. Dom then gets ready for the day, tells Alexa to stop playing the music. She leaves, opens a safe, which has her gun. Then she goes into Romero's house to investigate the crime scene, and she tells her partner, who keeps sneezing, to hold still, take pictures of the records they found. He says that they've contacted everyone there at the offices. She's the first to respond, and she says it doesn't mean much. Thousands of FBI details and records were released back. Every hacker has it, and she asks what the other men are doing. He says that it's forensics. They found his desktop unlocked, and once they're done analyzing it, they'll send over a report. The modem then explodes, sets on fire, and she gives him her card to see if they can find everything else, says to contact his doctor, and I'm loving this character. I'm really loving her. I mean, she is keenly aware of what she's doing. She doesn't put up with other people's shit, but she's also, you can tell, kind of a media mogul, you definitely see. I mean, clearly, media is a huge part of her life, and I think they just did a very good job with showing this episode, and they did a lot more with Dom than they did last week. I was kind of wondering what her purpose was going to be, but we can clearly see by the end of this episode what it's going to be, and I think they did a very good job, just like they did with Ray and Mobley, at humanizing her character. Really did love that, and I think that's something they're doing very well with all the characters this season, and something that I'm loving that last season I just think didn't do as much. So Darlene and Mobley, we realize, have gone to see Trenton, and that would make sense, because Trenton is the one character we haven't seen yet, and Trenton gets her family away, closes the door, and says, according to the police reports, there was no sign of a robbery, and Mobley says that someone was there with the sole purpose of offing him, and Darlene says that they're just jumping to conclusions, and Trenton asks about Gideon. That's 2 murders in a row associating this hack, and Darlene is pretty convinced that they've caught the guy, and it's just some whack job. Besides, she doesn't really care about discussing this with her, given how easily she's forgotten about what they've started, and Trenton asks if it's because she doesn't care for stupid hijinks like burying the money in the murder of the park, which Darlene says is just killing confidence in Evil Corp, which is exactly what they need to be doing right now. And I mean, we saw last week that Darlene clearly is terrified of what's going on, but she's hiding that and replacing it with all this confidence because she feels that she needs to do that. With Elliot gone, she's kind of panicking herself, where she's kind of in this mode where she's like, okay, I gotta step up. My brother's not here. I gotta do what he could do. The problem is, I don't know if Darlene is as good as holding it together as Elliot is, definitely. And I think definitely we're seeing here that she's not as good as holding it together. And Darlene says that it's not them. They don't know any of them except Darlene. they accept Darlene and Elliot, and they will only communicate through her, and she hasn't told them anything, and Mobley says that she's not the only person that they've talked to, referring to Elliot, of course, and she assures him that there's no way that he would do that, and she says that the state he's in, they don't know. Darlene says to not say what he's thinking, and Mobley says if she doesn't want to listen, that's on her. But he's taking off and not staying around to be next. He's going to stay with his buddy in Arizona, obviously because he's terrified that the Dark Army's coming after him, and Darlene says that if they want them dead, they would be already, and if he's gonna end up in Arizona, being dead is not much of a downgrade, and trying to ask what she suggests they do. She says that she'll talk to Elliot and hit them both when she gets more info, and until then, she needs them to stop spazzing and be cool. So, you do get the sense that these storylines aren't going to come together. They're separate right now, and Elliot, of course, is away from F Society, but we definitely get the sense here that he's not going to be able to run for long. I mean, obviously, Darlene's going to come after him, she has questions for him, and he's not going to be able to run for that much longer. I think we definitely do see that here. So, she leaves them, and Mobley says that he doesn't trust her or Elliot since he tried to pull a gun on Romero, and says that they talked to the Dark Army, and now they're trying to tell him that they're not involved, and trying to ask what he's saying. He says that they just committed the crime of the century, and they're trying to cover their tracks, and right now they're the tracks, and basically he obviously is not convinced from Darlene. He's not convinced that any of this, that they're safe at all. He's not convinced that any of this is going to work, really, and I think she deep down knows that they don't really know what they're doing either, and that they don't really have control here, but I think she kind of just wants to be in control, and there's not really much she can do, and I think until Elliot's pulled back in, they're going to be in this state of panic for a while, definitely. So, Ray is then talking to a man named RT, who clearly used to work for him, and he's half blind, and says that a lot of life is a balancing act. They're all just doing their best tightrope walking among that bit of ungodly pain that's daring them to trip up, take money, and hell. One isn't very useful without the other, case in point, even though he's been paid handsomely, the physical condition he's in right now kind of cancels that out, and he'd like to say up front he's very sorry this happened to him. He says that this guy he deals with can be ruthless, and he's more of a positive reinforcement kind of guy, just known to be more productive. Nevertheless, that doesn't change what's been done to him. The person who did this will get proportionate retribution, but he still needs him to fix something for him. Sight's been down way too long. Good news is, once he brings it back up, he will get his money back in time, good willing his help, and that's all he wants to do, is help put his life back in balance, and I like seeing, what he's going through. I mean, like Ray said, he's not a hacker, but he clearly is involved with computers, and we definitely do see that here, and I like that we got a little more characterization of what's going on with him in this next scene. So RT says that he keeps emptying the Bitcoin wallets and the server keeps crashing up and he doesn't know how to stop, and if he only knows basic network security measures, then he'll have to find someone who can migrate the site to another more secure location and set up a system of hot cold wallets, and pleads him to help him figure out because he can't. And Ray then gets into the car with the man who clearly is the one that made him half blind, and he's like trying to convince him again, and Ray says that just because he beat a man's face to a pole doesn't mean he'll know what he doesn't, and he says they're not animals. They need to find someone who can do the migration thing he's been talking about, and asks him about the weather, and tells him to turn on the goddamn weather station, and they leave, and Elliot then tells us that it's been 3 days since he slept. He's up to about 200 milligrams now, but that's not the secret. He's gone for good, but that's not the secret. And he basically tells them Mr. Robot is gone. He's gone for good, and I'm like, no, there's no way that Mr. Robot's gone. If Mr. Robot's gone, the show be done. The show is called Mr. Robot. There's no way that he's going to be gone. At least he thinks so. He says it was so simple. He's more aware now, way more focused. And Rami Malek just killed it in this scene. Just showing all this fake happiness, and everything you can tell here is so fake, but it's also so funny just seeing this. I mean, it's very reminiscent of episode 3 when he said that F Society is over. I mean, we knew for a fact that F Society wasn't actually over, and you can tell here that Mr. Robot's definitely not gone. He said he's way more focused, he's 100% gone, the Adderall's working, and fuck it, the drug doesn't feel good. He says he's even more comfortable talking to people, and he's actually talking to Leon about his Seinfeld philosophy. It's really funny. He asks why he hasn't done this before. He says he's even found God. He says even the basketball game is enthralling. The ball goes into a hoop. He screams slam dunk, as things can finally go back to normal, and it will just be us from now on. Together, maybe he'll read to us or just talk, but the point is now he's gone, and he says straight out that he knows we're not buying into this because it's not true, and he says it was feeling good for a few days, weren't we, but this is the 5th day of not sleeping, and he thinks as he continues to pop pills, and he says that this is the overwhelming fear building, the nastiness, the scream. He says he knows Leon's talking backwards, and he says this isn't good. He starts to see many people in F Society mass. He says this is his internal fatal error from which his system can't recover, and I love that he refers to his mind as a computer, because in many ways, everyone says the greatest computer in the world world is your mind. And it's just really genius the way he talks about this being a kernel panic, and he says that now, day 6 without sleep, he's crashing, his next his consciousness will go. He says the panic isn't settling anymore. Also, something else I noticed is the when he keeps popping pills in this episode, you keep hearing like just the error sound, you know, boop, boop, you know, the sound you get on like a Mac computer when there's an error that comes up. Just a really cool attention to detail. Again, really like the way that was done. Very small moment, but just really cool, and I think really added to the stakes here. And he says the screen his mind is coming back as he stares in his journal. Angela's then getting ready for the dates, and we get a similar scene last week where she had that tape and everything. She said in the mirror that she's likable, attractive, and beautiful, and she basically goes ready to face, you know, Price and everything, and we get this really big scene. She walks into the restaurant, and she's greeted by Price and a few other colleagues, Saul Weinberg, Managing Director of Operations, and Jim Chevy, SVP of VA, and she introduced herself. Price says that he's a master of the universe. Price sits down at dinner and pays the check, and Saul says that because of the situation, he has to pay up front now, which, again, just really interesting. The fact that, again, you really do see how fucked, you know, Evil Corp is. They're in the worst situation of everyone, and he gives a toast to many new relationships, being new opportunities. Dom is then at home masturbating to a chat roulette site, which I thought was pretty funny, but again, I like seeing that besides Dom being a police officer, she's anything but this professional, you know, woman. She's not like that at all. She clearly is a media mogul, and she invests her entire life on the internet, which I just completely goes against, you know, Elliot's philosophy and life, you know, just everything he wants to accomplish, that he feels that we're invested in our phones, and it goes completely with everything Elliot says. And she asks Alexa when the end of the world is, and she says, well, most likely to be about the sun. Dom says, right, but of course you can tell she isn't sure. She looks at her phone, looks at the information connect to F Society, because she knows there's definitely a connection there. So Elliot says the Adderall is almost entirely out of his system, and with that, sleep will return any second. Mr. Robot will be back, and his mind will be under siege. He has become his god, and like all gods, their madness takes you prisoner. He says he guesses he couldn't avoid Gideon's death after all. His dam of guilt is finally cracked. He wants to cry, but he's so high that he can't. He's at his church group, listens to a man's story, and Elliot is chosen to speak next because God can't help him, and he gives what is by far the standout scene of this season so far. Rami Malek, I mean, he just got nominated for an Emmy, and scenes like this, I think, really tell us why he's nominated for an Emmy, because this scene was just incredible. There aren't many shows that could pull off a scene like this, but this show, just the way that it's able to get into Elliot's mind and give us all this false information, this just feels like that. But we know that Elliot's actually feeling this way and really getting into, you know, his psychosis and everything that's going on with him. I mean, we've done that so much that at this point we're with him and we understand what he's going through, and I think they showed that very well. I really did love that, and basically, he says that that's what God does. He helps. He asks why God didn't help his innocent friend who died for no reason, while the guilty roam free and forget the why-nots, the countless wars declared in his name, skip the random meaningless murder. How about the racist phobia soup they've been drowning in because of him? And he's not just talking about Jesus. He's talking about all organized religion, exclusive groups, created to manage control the dealer, getting people hooked on the drug of hope. His followers, nothing but addicts who want their hit of bullshit to help their dope meme of ignorance addicts afraid to believe the truth that there is no order, no power, and all religions just fantasizing mind worms meant to divide us. So it's easier to rule us by the charlatans. They want to run us all. We are to them our paying fanboys of their poorly written sci-fi franchise. And he doesn't listen, and he says he doesn't listen to his imaginary friend, so why the fuck should he listen to theirs? And as much as obviously I'm not with Elliot and I don't agree with him, he does kind of a point there that we really do buy into this idea of God. And he says that people think that they'll worship some key to happiness, that's just how he owns them, but he's not crazy enough to believe that distortion of reality, so fuck God, he's not a good enough scapegoat for him. And Elliot tells us to please tell him he didn't say all that out loud, and then he realized he did, leaves the group, and he just realizes that he's hurting, and that, you know, taking this Adderall has really made things worse. He has no filter, you know, anything, he can't hold anything back, and that's what people say when you get drunk or get high, is that you can't hold anything back, and that's exactly what Elliot did here. Taking the Adderall really was probably the worst thing he could have done, because now he has no filter, everything he's thinking is coming out, he's not thinking about what he's saying, and he just, you know, ruined the entire church group for him. So, I thought that was just an incredible scene, though. Rami Malek killed it so well, and there are just so many shows that wouldn't be be able to do that, and the fact that the show actually got away with it and took a risk like that, that's something that I really admire. So Price then tells his colleagues Angela and him are going to have one more drink. His colleagues tells her to visit any time, and they have lunch. And Price talks to her about the men and how important they are, and they were both in the room with Colby when they made that grave error covering up the leak in her hometown. Ordinary men capable of extraordinary things. He says that their CFO has discovered that over the years, both Jim and Saul have engaged in some nasty insider trading, thick as thieves, like they like to buddy up on their white-collar crimes, regular Rosencrantz and Guided Stern. And he gives her a disc that has enough evidence to put them away for years. And he says that you should get home. Her car will be out front. She says whatever he's doing, she doesn't trust it. And she can clearly tell that he's the bad guy. I mean, and that's something that Michael Christopher just does so well. I've said it before. Philip's a guy that's just very enticing. The way he talks to you, he's like seducing you with everything he says. Every little word that comes out of his mouth just sounds like he's seducing you or just manipulating you in some way. And she doesn't, that's the thing about Angela, is that she doesn't buy into it. She's not just going to buy into it, like, yes, I'll pull off this mission for you. She says to him straight out, look, okay, I will do this, but I'm going to do it my way, and I don't trust you. And she says it's big. He says he understands the big decision she's making because these men, their lives will be destroyed. But the minute she removes emotion from this, she'll do just fine. So he's basically telling her to be emotionless. And Portia Doubleday, again, I'm going to go what she said. That she said that Angela wants to be like Price. And you definitely see that here. But I don't think that's completely true. I don't think she wants to be as heartless as Price. But I think he kind of wants her to be like him. He sees a lot of himself in her, definitely. And he wants to shape her to be just like him. She wants to be in his position one day, but I don't necessarily know if she wants to run things exactly like he did. There's still a shred of humanity in her, but I feel like throughout the season it's going to be more and more stripped away, and definitely I think the only person that's going to be able to save her is Elliot. I think that honestly is going to be the only person, but we'll have to see how that goes, because this is just getting really interesting. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens there. So Elliot's in at the diner. Ray comes in, says he heard he had an interesting night, has a journal, and Elliot says he threw it out for some reason. And Ray says that he figured he may want it down the road because he's been there before. He says 5 years, 7 months, and 2 days. He finally basically admits him what's going on. His wife passed away a few weeks of being frozen in his own grief. He woke up one morning, fixed himself breakfast like he usually does, plugged in his dialect machine like he usually does, and then he started talking out loud, and he thought he was crazy, obviously. I mean, he's talking to inanimate objects, and he says that he did again the next day and acted as if he was talking to her. Elliot asks why he's telling him all this, and Ray says it's because they're a lot more alike than they think. And this is a scene that I absolutely love, is just seeing these two get to know each other. There's a lot more going on than we think, and we'll get to the real point of this in a second, but Dom then goes to see Nell, who asks her if she's crazy for knocking on her door this early. She's asked who she is, of course, and she says she has a few more on her door. She has a few more questions about her son's murder, and Nell says that she's already talked to the police, and Dom says she knows the police took her joints, she went through all her files, and she also knows that she has arthritis and probably can't roll them herself, so she probably had Romero do it for her, and literally offers to roll her a joint. I mean, this is how laid back and chill Dom is. I love this character. There's no character like this that's a police officer on TV. I absolutely love everything about Dom, because other than the fact that she's a police officer, she's this normal, chill girl who just does completely uncop-like things, and I love it. But she's not necessarily a bad cop. She kind of just does her own thing, and that's something I'm absolutely loving about the character of Dom DiPiero so far. So this does convince Nell to let her come in, and she actually does roll her a joint, and Nell says it's tight, not perfect, but definitely doable. She says Romero was around much, but when he was always doing it for her. Dom says she sees she's moving out. Nell says she can't stay there no more. She raised him. There are too many memories there, and I like that we see that even though Nell, we can see, is kind of a cranky old lady, she did love her son. And Dom asks if he ever did anything suspicious. Nell says he fooled around with computers ever since he was little. Dom asks if he ever had any friends. Nell says that he didn't, except Mobley. Asks her for a glass of water. Dom says she told the cops someone would come but didn't see them now with these cataracts. She goes to get water. She sees papers in a basket, asks if he said his name and if she saw him before. Nell says that she hasn't and her mind was dancing in the clouds. All she knows is she can't stay there anymore, not without Romero, so she needs the money, and Dom sees a flyer that says the end of the world party. Of course, that was the party when the 5-9 hack took place, and she's obviously very, she definitely finds this very telling. She knows there's definitely something going on there. She doesn't know what it is, but she knows there's definitely something connected to this. And I love that Dom is going to find out this information. We'll get to that in a second, but we go back to Elliot and Ray, and we basically realize what the point of this all is, because Elliot asked Ray what he should do, and Ray said to ask why he started praying in the first place, where Elliot says that he thought it was the right answer to controlling his life. Ray says his wife, she drove her car that day and did everything right, wore a seatbelt, hands at 10 and 2. She was the most perfect driver he'd ever met. It was annoying. She stayed in a line, never went above or below the speed limit, stopped at traffic signs, followed every rule, and then one day none of that mattered. He says control is about as real as a one-headed unicorn taking a leak at the end of the rainbow. It all goes back to Mr. Robot's, saying of control is just an illusion. There really is no control, because as much as we want to be in control, some things we just can't control. Nature takes its course at sometimes, and Elliot asks what they have. Ray says the bullshit people say when you fall, you gotta get up. He rejects it because the whole thing is a fall. He can't help but be a perpetual state of grasping in the dark. It's not about getting up, it's about stumbling in the right direction. The only true way to move forward, and he asks if who he wrote about in his journal he still sees. He can tell the person he wrote about meant something to him, and this is how these two are connected. They both see things that aren't really there. Ray in the sense of his wife, and Elliot in the sense of his father. Now, it's different for Elliot, definitely, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, because I know a lot of people have been talking about the relationship between Elliot and Mr. Robot, and how destructive it is this season compared to last season, but Elliot said he shouldn't have come. He didn't want to talk about this. He almost leaves, and Ray says yes, he does, because he can't keep this thing inside anymore. He's going to be the one to finally get someone to talk to about it. Elliot, this is the one thing that's awesome. Elliot's never had anyone he can to talk to about this, because everyone would think he's crazy. And Ray doesn't, because Ray does the same exact thing, and this is why I love it they've introduced this character. By introducing this character, we now finally have someone for Elliot to talk to about his disability. He no longer feels out of place, and he actually has someone he can share it with, and he even asked him if he plays chess because he's been looking for a good adversary. He gets up, and there's Mr. Robot. He asks and basically there he is, staring right there. It's very interesting the way that was done. But then we get to the end of the episode. He asks what we think if Ray is right. Maybe it's not about avoiding the crash, but it's about setting a breaking point to find the flaw in the code and carry on. Fix it until we find the next flaw. The quest to keep going, to always fight for footing. He says maybe they're all just stumbling from the right questions to the wrong answers, or from the right answers to the wrong questions. It doesn't matter where you come from, as long as you keep stumbling. Maybe that's all it takes, and maybe that's as good as it gets. And as he's talking, we see Dom goes to the meeting place in the flyer. She finds the arcade where F Society used to be, and she's now found where they are. I'm pretty sure she's going to catch up to them, and that is the way the episode ends, and such a good way to end this episode. But there's really so much to talk about, so let's just get into it all, because really so much that happened here, and so much to get into. What I loved about this episode, like I said, is that besides all the stuff that was going on with Elliot, this was an ensemble episode. There was no star of this episode. Everything really is connected in some way, but it's all about how people are dealing with things and how they recover from the 5-9 hack. Everyone's really kind of, worrying about it. And I want to talk about the Mr. Robot-Elliot relationship for a second, because a lot of people have been talking about that. How last season he was more of a mentor, and this season he's more of, destructive. And I don't think that that's supposed to be destruction of his character in any way, or character assassination, as they call it. I don't think that's what this is. What I do think it is that now that Elliot knows that Mr. Robot is part of his personality and not actually there, he obviously wants to get rid of him because he thinks he's crazy, and he feels that he needs to get rid, he wants to be himself. He wants to be in control. He doesn't want any of these blackouts anymore. It's all starting to make sense to him, and he feels the best way to stop all that is to get rid of Mr. Robot. When we've clearly seen that that's not the way to do it. He needs to face the music. He needs to understand what's going on. He can't just hide from this anymore. And again, what I love is that Ray is the guy he can finally talk to about. Ray's the one that's going to pull him out of it, and I can't wait to see the way that goes down. The relationship they're going to have is going to be so interesting. And what is Ray exactly involved in? We know he's obviously involved with some sort of business, but some tells me I don't think that he's the good guy. I really don't. The way he had that scene with RT, what he did to him, I mean, that guy beat him to a pulp, and even though Ray said it's not good to beat people to a pulp, obviously, he didn't try to stop him, so some tells me Ray's not as good as we think, but we'll have to see what happens there. It's going to be definitely very interesting. We definitely get the sense that Elliot's going to be pulled back in. I mean, Darlene's definitely going to talk to him about what's going on with the 5-9 hack, but is Mobley right? Was it the Dark Army that did this? I mean, we know this was a random guy who killed Gideon, but who the hell killed Romero? We didn't see any of that go down, so I think there's a reason why definitely why was the U and the N gone? There's definitely more of a reason as to why. Why didn't Romero want to talk about that? I mean, that definitely, he just made himself sound way more suspicious, and there's definitely more going on than we think. I think there's definitely more between, you know, the U and the N not being there, and I love that Dom already is on the scene. She already knows a lot of what's going on. She knows where F Society was, she knows about the end of the world hack. I mean, there's no doubt in her mind that they're the ones that did the 5-9 hack, but she doesn't know who the man was behind it all, who the mastermind was, and we get the sense that she's probably going to come after Elliot very quickly, and I already really do love her character, really what they've been doing with her. They do a good job of not making her a stereotypical cop at all, because she has none of the traits that a stereotypical cop does. Yes, she smokes, but she also seems like just your regular millennial, really. That's what she is. She's a millennial that happens to be a cop, and I love that. I love that about her. She's a media mogul. She's clearly into that. I mean, all those scenes we saw of her talking to Alexa, relying on all this technology, it's awesome. I love it. It completely goes against everything that Elliot wants us to do, and it's just awesome to see, and it shows how much of a villain she's going to be. Angela, I think, is the one with the toughest route right now, because she's in this really tough position where she does want to do what Price tells her to do, but at the same time, does she really want to put away these men? Does she really want to destroy their lives? Does she have that moral compass in her? Or is she going to strip away her humanity, like Price said, and give in to him? That really is a big question. I really like the way it's, you know, not a black or white answer. It's really not. There's a lot of questions on her hand, and I really like the way we're seeing this character of Angela evolve, because really, she's not an anti-hero. I mean, yes, she's an anti-hero, definitely, and I think very much we're seeing her kind of in the same way as Elliot, where she's doing a lot of things that aren't okay, but she really doesn't know how she feels about them yet. And I think overall it's very interesting. I think Elliot's really the only one that's going to be able to somewhat help her, and I think that's really what this is all leading up to. I mean, it's probably leading up to Angela and Elliot reconvening, and definitely something's going to go down there. I mean, Sam Ismail even hinted that there's going to be a lot more jabs at their romance this year. And now that she's not with Ollie, and now she's away from Allsafe, these two probably can get into a relationship, and a genuine relationship, and actually have some sort of a basis there. And I think Ray really is going to be the guy to get Elliot out of this. But I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with that. That's going to be very interesting. See how that goes. Overall, guys, amazing stuff. So much good stuff going on in this episode. Absolutely loved it. I loved every minute of this episode. Loving this season overall. I know a lot of people are saying that they don't like seasons much. I mean, it's different. Yes, it is very different, but I like that. They're taking a lot more risks. You know, they're doing a lot more longer length. I mean, Sam Ismail is directing every episode, but it's what he wants the show to be, and that's what I love. It's his vision the entire way through. Nobody's telling him what to do. He's doing it the whole way, and that's great. He knows what he wants his show to be. He's going to make the show the way he wants to, and I'm loving it so far, loving everything about it. Let me know what you guys saw this season. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. What are your thoughts on it? Are you liking the season so far? And then we'll see you guys in my next one, which will be for the season of Orange is the New Black Season 4. Damn, there's a lot of stuff to talk about there. And then we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.